work.
Thank you. That's the Fires of Pride.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 2 months painting. I have some fine motor skill difficulties with my back injury. And I decided that it doesn't have to be perfect. And that I was during the lockdown, and there was no one else painting in my house better than I can. And so any flaw, I just lived and let live, and I had fun. And you can see that there's joy in this painting. There's a bit of anger and, with the flames, but then there's also the happy queerness of the, rainbow colors and the flames. So Pride may be canceled again as it was this year, but you can't stop the fires of pride within, right?
Really great message. Thank
you. But, giving myself the slack to be disabled, right? To say, okay, I have a shaky hand. It's okay. I'll just do the best job I can with my shaky hand. It's fine.
Absolutely. I find, those little moments in disability art is what makes it more interesting and more engaging, I find. Those little mistakes, points of difference.
Oh, sure.
Alrighty, welcome everybody. I believe we can get started now. We're going to start today's conversation off with a land acknowledgement. So I will hand the floor over to Michelle.
Hello, my name is Michelle Dumont. I'm a Métis queer two-spirited artist from Thunder Bay, Ontario. I grew up on the shores of Gitchigami on Black Bay, so the next bay over from Thunder Bay. And I'd like to start this land acknowledgement by talking about steps. They're from Treaty 13. Their water source is Lake Ontario. Arts and Accessibility Network Manitoba and MAWA. Treaty 1, water sources Shoal Lake 40, First Nation. Sean Lee, Treaty 13. Water sources Lake Ontario. Michelle Dumont, Thunder Bay is located on the traditional lands of Fort William First Nation, signatory to the Robertson Superior Treaty of 1850. Water sources Gitchigumi, Lake Superior. Adriana Alcon and Yvette Sinarini, Treaty 1, Traditional Territory Anishbeg, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, Dene, and homeland of the Métis Nation. Winnipeg's drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40, First Nation. Miigwech.
Thanks, Michelle. Hello, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. Steps Public Art and Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba are happy to create this space for meaningful discussion. Before we get started, we ask that everyone attending today please turn off your mics during the panel discussion when you aren't verbally engaging with the panelists or the facilitator. And at the end of this session, we will be screen sharing the event image for recording purposes. You're welcome to leave the session whenever that final image pops up. Please do not feel obligated to stick around. I mention this because there is a bit of an awkward lag time between Zoom and Facebook, so please feel free to sign off at that point. My name is Janet Hinkle, she, her, and I'm a program coordinator with Steps Public Art. I have dark brown hair, brown skin, and I have a gray wall behind me with lots of framed artwork on it. Myself and Janelle from Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba will be available throughout this Zoom session should you have any questions or run into any technical issues. For those of you joining via Facebook Live, please feel free to connect with Grace and Megan by commenting throughout the broadcast. Please feel free to also use the chat function located on the lower right corner of your screen to ask questions throughout the session. During this event, our guest artists or members of the STEPS team may periodically encourage your participation. Please feel free to do so during these times if you're comfortable doing so. Zoom's auto captions have been turned on, and if you're joining us on Facebook Live and require captions, please feel free to join the Zoom session directly or turn on Facebook's auto captions feature on your screen. We also have 2 interpreters joining us today, and they should appear on your screen as a spotlighted video, but please let me or Janelle know if you do not see them. The artist talk will be recorded for future use by Steps Public Art, Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba, and our guest artist presenters. Just to give you all a little background on Steps Public Art, for those who are unfamiliar, the organization's mission is to transform underutilized public spaces through art and inspire other cities to reimagine their public spaces through large-scale art installations. By engaging Toronto's most diverse and underserved communities, we hope to strengthen the identity and character of the city's neighborhoods. This artist talk is being presented as part of the CreateSpace Residency's spring programming. CreateSpace is a national public art residency program designed in collaboration with advisors, including one of our panelists today, Sean Lee, from coast to coast, to provide 10 emerging Black, Indigenous, First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and racialized artists in residence with the skills, relationships, and practical experience needed to take their public art practice to the next level. The 2021 CreateSpace Artists in Residence were selected by a committee of BIPOC identifying public artists and professionals from across Canada and were announced along with other residency news this past April. To learn more about the program and the creatives involved, please follow the link that has just been posted into the chat box. I'll now pass the floor off to Janelle to introduce herself and Arts Accessibility Network.
Hi, thank you so much, Janet. My name is Janelle Shaw. I'm the Executive Director of Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba, and my pronouns are she and her. Just to give anyone who needs a visual description, I am a white woman in my 30s with brown hair pulled up in a ponytail. I'm wearing a blue t-shirt and my background is blurred. So Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba is a regional, not-for-profit art organization dedicated to the full inclusion of artists and audience with disabilities into all facets of the arts community. Our mandate is to support artists with disabilities in achieving individual artistic excellence, promote higher visibility of these artists within all disciplines, and promote policies and practices intended to make the arts more accessible for all. A&M provides training for artists with disabilities and works with other art organizations to provide mentorships that integrate and empower artists with disabilities within the larger community. A&M also hosts exhibition, art and body fairs, cabarets, and other performance types. All our events occur in fully wheelchair accessible spaces, and we are able to adapt to include other accommodations as well, such as ASL interpretation. A&M also works with other art organizations to provide information about accessibility. A&M's goal is to create a more welcoming, equitable space for artists with disabilities throughout the sector and for the continued empowerment and celebration of artists with disabilities. Thank you very much for letting me stumble through that. I have a speech impediment, and sometimes when I get nervous, it kicks in, so I apologize for that. I'm now going to pass it off to our moderator, Adriana.
I'll unmute myself. Thanks, Janelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Adriana Alarcon. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm seated actually in the main space at MAUA. So I just have a very plain white background with some beautiful beaded masks that you have to be a lot closer to see the details. Myself, I'm a person of color. I have black hair and wearing glasses, and I'm wearing a little necklace and a light colored top. I will be the facilitator for today's discussion, and I'm very excited to hear what everyone has to say. Thank you to Janet and Janelle for all their work to make this event happen and for the invitation. Just to introduce myself very briefly, I'm a Latinx, queer, disabled, cisgender artist and arts administrator. My practice combines traditional craft knowledge and contemporary narratives. I am the program and outreach coordinator at Mentoring Artists for Women's Art, or MAUA. And MAUA has been the leader in visual arts mentorship for over 35 years. Recently, we have partnered with Steps and mentored them on creating another mentorship program, which is this CreateSpace residency that is going so smoothly right now. want to also thank Yvette Sinarini, who's joining us today, who has been a mentor in our program and is one of the people that really make our mentorship wheels keep turning. How about that? I will hand this over now to Michelle.
Hi, my name is Michelle Dumont. I'm a Métis queer two-spirited artist from Thunder Bay. I'm wearing a purple shirt and a Ojibwe floral tie, and I have salt and pepper hair. And what would you like me to discuss?
Well, I think we could go on to Yvette for introduction, and we'll get into discussion very soon.
Oh, great. It's an introduction. Great. Okay. Thanks. I wasn't sure.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yvette Sinarini. I'm a woman with brown hair and brown eyes. I wear glasses and I use a power chair for mobility. I also use this apparatus to help me write with. So if you see something poking out of my hand, or that's what that is. And yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I'm attending this panel discussion from my home office. Should I give a more like a bio as well, or just my description, Adriana?
Oh yes, please introduce yourself, Yvette.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a Francophone Métis visual artist. I have participated in group shows in Manitoba, Quebec, and Ontario. And I've had one solo show at La Maison des Artistes here in Winnipeg, dedicated to serving Francophone artists. My work in photo collage and most photo collage is characterized by, I use a lot of animals as subject, and I examine the intricacies of emotion through simple aesthetic and sarcasm. And yeah, I also have a Bachelor of Education. So I do a lot of mentoring and workshops, and I'm currently helping, develop online art classes. So it's a little bit of what my practice is about.
Great, thank you very much, Yvette. And I want to pass the floor over to Sean Lee to introduce yourself as well.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Sean. I'm coming in from Treaty 13 territory, also known as Tekaronto, the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Huron-Wendat. As a brief description, I use he or they pronouns, and I think I'm kind of masculine presenting. I'm someone who's East Asian, Chinese, and I've got kind of like black hair that comes down to my shoulders. I'm someone who's visibly disabled, so my back curves and my shoulders are uneven. And if you met me in real life, I'd be someone who's quite short. I'm wearing these like steampunk glasses. They're green with gold rims that sort of float on the frames. And I'm wearing kind of just a plain black t-shirt. I'm in my dining room, and behind me, there's a beautiful painting, very kind of abstract, by Valentin Brown, who is an artist at Tangled. And I've got some books on the shelf, just, something to decorate up my Zoom background. And I guess just about myself really quickly, I'm an artist and curator. I'm really interested in cultivating disability arts and culture. And I'm someone who's, I'm the director of programming with Tangled Art and Disability. And Tangled is a space in Toronto, in Tekaronto, that is dedicated to cultivating Mad Deaf disability arts and culture, as well as exploring accessible curatorial practices. So with that kind of long introduction, I'll pass it back to Adriana.
Thank you, Sean. So I wanted to go back to the premise of the event today, accessing a creative access as creative catalyst. And the question, have you ever been present in a creative space and noticed the many ways it was designed to function and who it was intended to serve? Perhaps it was created to welcome a wide range of people and communities, or one community specifically. So with that in mind, I wanted to begin the discussion, and I wanted to see who would volunteer to take on my first question. Let's talk about spaces where you have experienced public art or art making or art engagement that were very accessible. Like, let's think about a place that was very welcoming, very accessible, made you feel that you could just flow, that removed all barriers. Does anyone have a place in real life that exists in that manner? I see Michelle's hand up.
Hello. I didn't realize that the introduction should be explaining who I am and what I do. So what I do is I'm a multidisciplinary artist who I am currently you're looking at the winner of the Barbara Laurent Women in Art. As a two-spirited artist, I qualified. And so I won that recently. I have been fortunate to have been allowed to go to the Republic of Inclusion, which was a conference in Ottawa in, was it 2017? It was held in conjunction with the National Arts Center, and it was at the Shankman Arts Center in Orleans, Ottawa. And it brought disabled artists from all over the country, from theater, from music, from visual arts. It brought, film, disabled, film people. It brought people with many multi different disabilities, and it brought them together to problem solve and to discuss our realities. And it brought the National Arts Council, the representatives from the National Arts Council to offer what they had available for the attendees. I met amazing artists from all over Canada and some from around the world at this conference. I walked into one of the theater spaces and there were toys. There were like stress balls, and there were things to multi-sensory things for people to if they needed to fidget, they could have a mat to be on, they could sit and be comfortable, or they could like color with like a coloring book, or there were things to help focus your attention. I had never seen that before, and I was just taken aback at how comfortable, if I needed to shift my weight because of my chronic pain, if I needed to sit on a mat or lay down on a mat, I could feel comfortable to do it, and I did it. And I was given permission to fidget. And I loved that, and I needed it. When you're in a stressful situation, to be allowed to be human is just a remarkable thing. And so I've seen environments that are all inclusive and that mean it when they say that access, and we will try to accommodate any barrier that you may have. And it was a remarkable experience. And it spoiled me for everything else.
Sounds wonderful. And I can sense from your excitement of it that you actually got so much more from the experience than what you're talking about. Like, you're only talking about the access point. And so it was like from there on upwards. And how about Sean or Yvette, did you want to answer my question? And I could reiterate, is there any space of public art or art engagement where you've been fully allowed to exist as a human and flowed creatively?
No. Short answer.
Short answer.
But like it's a slow process, right? It's like baby steps for everybody, and some places are more welcoming than others, and I'm not sure that there'll ever be like my house is the perfect place for me. So I'm really not sure that anywhere else I go will be able to meet up with that expectation. So for me, that's why it's always a no, but there are places where I feel more comfortable, and one of which of course is Maua, mostly for its very holistic way of serving artists. It's not just about the art or the artwork or the artist. It's about the whole person, and making people feel welcome, and feeling able to express our accommodations, and having like a sincere willingness to help and accommodate. That's sort of what I appreciate, because it's not just physical accommodations, it's also attitudinal, and in that sense. I also appreciate the Winnipeg Art Gallery that we have here in Winnipeg. It's very wide open spaces, although I still almost managed to knock down a humongous soapstone sculpture once with my wheelchair, which gave me a heart attack. But so, wide open spaces, so I don't bump into anything or scratch any walls, is nice. They have the elevators and the open doors. And they have, the staff there is really thinking about inclusivity by offering larger prints, for like catalogs in larger print, or offering adapted tours where you might be able to use other senses to experience the artwork. And they have like groups, focus groups, sort of with Alzheimer's, people who have Alzheimer's, to be able to sort of express themselves and remember through art. And so those are those are important steps. And for me, those two organizations are kind of like the models of for Winnipeg anyhow, of how organizations should try anyhow to adapt to my disability and everyone else's.
Oh, thank you. And Sean, finally, did you have any places like that in mind?
Yeah, I think for me, there is no such thing as fully accessible, which I've seen tossed around in a lot of spaces. But I think similar to Yvette, I think there's this idea that a space can be fully accessible, but I don't think we are ever going to get to that. I think the idea of fully accessible is almost like a horizon point that we're always trying to reach. Historically, disabled people weren't included in society. And a big part of it is because disability, rights didn't exist. And so a lot of folks didn't think about disabled people when society was honestly being built. And so I think for access, like for CRIP folks to gather right now is something already in and of itself quite revolutionary, for there to be a disability community, because a lot of the mainstream understandings of disability has been through this medical lens, where disability is only something in your body and it's not something that we all are kind of participating in together. You know, access is not, for a lot of the mainstream, access isn't the responsibility of society, but rather your own kind of thing to take on. So with that being said, I think not everything's not like hopeless, right? like you know, for instance, I think one time Alex Ballmer, who's a noted blind actor and performer, she said about the Tangled gallery space, she said, like, I think there's a really unique tone because she comes into there knowing she's been imagined, and she goes into the gallery feeling invited and included. And I think this idea of hospitality is really important to access, because we can create checklists and we can create lots of, you know, like compliance measures, but access isn't something that's scientifically quantifiable. It's something that's really been made, and it's something that's a relationship that you take on. And so I think there's a lot of issues that I sort of take when people want to implement the checklist and then they can say they're fully accessible. And I don't want to kind of list like, this is the things that we do, because then someone can take it and use it. And I think they should implement a lot of these steps, but I don't want it to feel like this is the only thing you have to do. I think we always want to strive towards what I kind of name like a CRIP horizon, like this idea of somewhere else that's, you know, untouched by ableism. And, you know, that there's a future in which disabled folks can gather and be themselves wholly. But we're not there yet because ableism is so ingrained into our structures. It's just built into everything. And even all the spaces that I think are created for CRIP folks, when we start taking in, you know, funding, when we start taking in, you know, kind of neoliberal structures, then we inherently are fighting against an ableist system when we are creating these spaces. So the long-winded way of saying, I think we're always moving towards that CRIP horizon. I think we're always, there's always better and new ways of creating a more inclusive space. But there hasn't, for me, ever been a fully accessible venue, program, like even within Tangled, I would say, like we're always working towards it, but we'll never, I think, be there.
Right, and I hear you saying that the horizon point is, it, you know, as you're walking towards it, it moves further away. And I think that's a really beautiful way of putting the practice of incorporating accessibility measures and not just taking on tasks on a checklist, so that your practice is always evolving and your practice is always being analyzed. And is it working? Is it necessary? Who is coming? Like really having a relationship with the people that you serve. So then the next question I had, did anybody want to add any last comments on spaces or programs or any locations that you want to talk about before I move on? Don't see any hands. Okay, so I wanted to follow that part and ask about abundance. And I think I already see a thread, but the spaces that we mentioned before, are they one of a kind? Are they few and far between? And is there a go-to space that you go to because it is the one that serves your needs accordingly? And do you feel like you have many choices of places to engage with public art?
I can start if you want. I would feel that I feel limited in the places that I can access, and I've just learned to live with that. My city, you know, we have a lot of really old heritage buildings, and a lot of the art galleries and even some of the organizations are in buildings that I can't access. And so I've just sort of learned to like delete those from my brain and my experiences and just focus on the ones that I can access. And so I stay in my circle of 4 or 5 places. And you know, I'm not too interested in venturing out too much further, because where I do go, they know me, they know what my needs are, or, you know, they're not patronizing, they're not, you know, they get it. And because I've sort of trained them already, right? And knowing what to expect before I, you know, wherever I'm going, it really helps reduce that anxiety of like, where am I, you know, like just the anxiety of leaving the sanctuary of my fully accessible home is, you know, I need to know that I'm going somewhere where I'm going to be comfortable, and otherwise I will never leave. So yeah, I feel like there's a really long way to go. I'm super excited that, oh, I think that's for the next question, so I'm gonna save it for later.
I'm glad to hear you're excited, but it is a question of very, it's just not a lot of abundance out there right now, right? Even as you mentioned, two locations in Winnipeg, but that's nowhere near enough. How about Sean or Michelle? Michelle?
So I would love to talk about multiple chemical sensitivity and art openings. It's always a minefield anywhere I go, because galleries love to paint walls before every show. And depending on how fresh that wall paint is, you know, depends on my access. Some curators understand that I'm a multiple chemical sensitive and what that means, that I do not tolerate volatile organic compounds very well. Some curators don't care, or they will say that, you know, oh, that's too bad, but we had to, you know, paint the walls, we had to do this, we had to do that. There was an opening last summer and they sanitized the whole gallery, but they used the sanitizer on these certain chairs that were fabric. And I got into that space, and within 20 minutes of being at the art opening, I was dizzy and I almost passed out, and I had to like get out of the gallery really quick. And I met the curator outside, who apologized and said, oh, we had to sanitize, we had to polish the floor. And, you know, and this is years after saying, you know, well, you polishing the floor to have a nice, bright, shiny floor makes me really ill. But I'm not the only multiple chemical sensitive who, you know, argues with the gallery about this, because they don't go to their openings either, because the floor is bloody polished with a cleaner that stinks. And so, yeah, like it's frightening to go into a space and realize it's making me violently ill and I need ventilation really quick. I mean, there are times when, you know, I'm not warned about, you know, a smoking bar, or I'm not warned about, you know, certain fragrances that are being propelled into the air, you know, on purpose. And it's like, well, this is problematic for me. And I thought I had made my needs known, but yeah, there are times when just walking into a gallery space and finding out that the artwork is made out of tar, you know, is a problem. And I'm like, oh, they use tar as a medium. Okay, I cannot walk around it, and I need my gas mask. So, yeah, there are times when, you know, just walking into art spaces are difficult.
Sean?
I think I'm gonna stay on my example of Tangled, just because I know it pretty well. And I think the thing is there isn't an abundance of spaces for enacting disability community. And I think a big thing that's missing is actually leadership from disabled folks, like the opportunities for disabled folks to, really drive these spaces. I think there's a lot of still a lot of stigma around disability. I think I've been seeing disability becoming less stigmatized, but certainly I still feel there's hesitancy in creating leadership opportunities for CRIP artists. And I think that's really something that's unique about Tangled, is a space for disabled curators to create programs, or for disability leadership to lead the creation of a program, because I think it allows us to be more experimental. It allows us to kind of create, to use our lived experience to kind of create decisions around things. For instance, there's an idea that Amanda Kachia, who's a disability curator, puts forward called creative access. And I think creative access is really about showcasing how robust and generative access can be. And it can really be an aesthetic or cultural approach to implementing accessibility. But I think it's also a political piece of work, and it really needs to come and be led by the communities that it's meant to center. So I think a lot of able-bodied curators who are interested in creative access, like, I think that would be great, but I think it needs to include disability leadership within the structure when that's being implemented. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think there aren't a ton of spaces, but I am seeing more and more, like Creative Users Projects, which is another disability-led organization in Ontario, is doing really incredible work. And, I've been seeing more spaces like Shay and Jen, who run the Cyborg Circus, like they're doing fantastic work. And so I am seeing more disability-led spaces, but they're still very far and few in between, and that's just the world that we're in right now.
Yeah, so it was sort of it wasn't a trick question, but it was a question where I thought, can we talk about what's possible, but without addressing the lack of abundance here? And there are so many amazing venues that are possible, and so many ways of making events accessible, but without it being a real commonplace occurrence, it might as well not exist, right? Like if it was like this one conference that we went to 2 years ago, and it set the bar so high, but how do we make that an everyday kind of an occurrence? So I wanted to, right now, we're just going to take about a 10-minute break because we're nearing the mark here. And so we'll come back at 20 minutes after 4 Central, 5 Eastern. And so go and stretch, get some water, hydrate, yell at your children. Whatever you might need to do to come back and be able to share a little bit more time and space with us.
I'm really glad that there was a break. I thought I was going to burst.
All right, and we want to start welcoming people back.
Hi, Adriana.
Hi, how are you? Did you get a little bit of a
Relief. I thought I was going to burst, and I'm so glad the timing was perfect.
wasn't it? I was following my script, and then it was perfect timing.
So should I be talking about like Def's Up? They've got a definitely superior art gallery, artist collective. They have a new space that is wheelchair accessible. And I have to give them props because for years, they were in the basement of a former department store, and there was no elevator access. And so any wheelchair user had to be carried down the stairs. So it's a big improvement that they have now moved to wheelchair accessible space.
Wow. And it is, I mean, it's worthy. I'm guessing it wasn't a small consideration for them to move into a new space. But you know, wheelchair access is such a bare minimum. You know, what if you're a person who uses a wheelchair and has other disabilities? So leaving your wheelchair is just not an option. Like, you know, and I remember us speaking about Def's Up earlier, and so that's why I was bringing up this. My next question is about spaces in the community who have undergone a renovation and have embraced accessibility. And was the renovation merely an architectural challenge, or are there spaces that have embraced accessibility in a thoughtful, in an innovative way, in a manner of embracing this practice, this walking towards the horizon point by something other than whether or not there are stairs? So does anyone have it, or did you want to talk more about Def's Up, or do you have any other examples in the community?
Well, that's one of the major ones, and then of course the new Thunder Bay Art Gallery is in the planning works. Like they're going to be building a new location on the waterfront, and so I haven't seen the particular blueprints yet. I hope that they have a mind to have more accessibility. Mind you, their old location was not bad. However, it's an old location, and buildings get mold, right? Like especially after a certain age. So Yvette is right on the money there. That you can smell old carpet, right? It's one of those things. So yeah, I would love to see the blueprints of the new Thunder Bay Art Gallery. They've released something a couple of years ago, and I guess the pandemic has stalled its construction, but it's still a go.
And Yvette, do you have any other thoughts on that, or Sean?
Yeah, when I was speaking earlier, I was saying that I was excited because there's been a building in Winnipeg here that's being renovated to welcome 3 or 4 arts organizations, and one of which is Urban Shaman, and Urban Shaman has been inaccessible for me. And as a Francophone Métis visual artist, that is one place that I would like to be a little further involved, but I'm so disconnected. All I have is the newsletter to back onto, and so this new building is going to house Mawa and Video Pool and Creative Manitoba, and so that's really encouraging and exciting. Another thing that I wanted to mention was that sometimes some artists are anxious to have their work be accessible, and so they take that responsibility onto themselves instead of waiting for institutions to mandate it or accommodate it. And so I've recently run into a few artists who took it upon themselves to make their piece accessible. And I hoped maybe I could just show a couple of images of some artists who did that, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
And so I can just share screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, always turn on my printer instead of ignore that motor. Jeez. Okay. Nope, there I go again. Okay.
Just take your time.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to my cute little pictures that I had ready for you. Oh, good Lord.
Are we showing us the Sarah and Johnson?
Yeah, I wanted to show
Okay, let me bring that up.
I have images from when it was in Winnipeg. So Sarah Ann made this catwalk because she did a performance in a hospital hallway, it was called, and the hallway was like in a circle, and the spectators climbed the stairs to watch her performance in the hallway from the top. And she had wanted the piece to be accessible with a ramp, but the gallery where it was showing said that, you know, they'll only do it if a person who uses a wheelchair says they're going to come. So yeah, so I had to be that person who said, okay, I'm coming, and to make them build this humongous ramp. And this is like the way that it looks in a gallery where there is no adaptation for the wheelchair. And the one that in Winnipeg, if you put like plug in Sarah Johnson hospital hallway, you'll see it's like the biggest ramp I have ever used, because it went all the way into the entrance of the gallery, up and around that whole thing, so that I could make my way all the way up and participate. And you know, I really appreciated that accommodation, but it really made me feel isolated in my inclusion, just because like it was just for me. And what if that day I decided that I didn't want to go, or I was sick and I wouldn't use it? Then what? Yeah, so here's the website where the ramp started at the very entrance and went all the way around. So it was this big monstrosity of plywood, but it allowed me to participate and just made it that much better. And another artist that I just been working with lately, right now, is Erica Lincoln. If Adriana, you could just put Erica Lincoln Instagram, you'll see a picture of her. She has, she's working on she's finished a project called Neural Knot. And if you stand on the platform, you could feel the vibration of the music. No, that's not
I
her.
can't see it.
Yeah.
It's not her?
And so she made the platform accessible so the wheelchair could drive on it. You could stand on it. People who are deaf could hear, could feel the vibration of the sound that the sound that the sculpture is making. And so she consulted with me, and you know, I helped her with it. And so I thought that was just really noble of an artist to think of that as she was planning out her work, and to have me follow along in the creation of it, just to, you know, have some sort of, you know, she really made an effort to make her work accessible to as many people as she could. So, you know, sometimes I think us artists, we are the creative ones. We're the ones with all the good ideas. Sometimes that's it's just going to have to come from us, you know.
Exactly. And being included in the planning stage, but not being, you know, pressured or being held hostage to that,
like the
idea of like, you must show up because we went out of our way to accommodate you.
Which is, I mean, the way that ASL interpretation must feel like as well, like, well, we'll have ASL if, it's just you putting someone in such a precarious position. I mean, so yeah, I thought of those two, and I wanted to share those two projects.
Thank you. And I think we're on the topic now of the reasons. What are the reasons?
Sorry, I don't know if Sean had a chance to respond.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I also just wanted to really quickly talk about a kind on this idea of like improvement. But I also just wanted to say I really appreciated, Yvette, what you brought up, because I think it's so true that access can't just be this add-on, right? Like it's so much more meaningfully engaged when it's part of the process. And it's something that we try to do at Tangled, is like think about how access can really be an aesthetic. And I've had artists work with folks like Vibrofusion Lab in London, Ontario, where you can create like vibrational haptics to go with your video, or think about like poetic ways that audio description can be integrated into the video so that it's kind of an integral part of experiencing the piece, or like captions that can be really interesting and like done in ways that feel like they're meant to be an exciting part of the video. And I guess like the example that I was originally going to give, though, is a little bit different. It was actually in response to some critique, and it was part of the second Cripping the Arts symposium that happened with headed by Eliza Chandler, with a number of partners, including Tangled and like creative users and Bodies in Translation. And I'm going to also just share my screen really quickly, because I want to show the access guide that was created for Cripping the Arts. So an access guide, and I'll try to describe the pages that I'm showing, but an access guide is essentially like a how-to kind of guide for folks to navigate their space, to like arrive and what they can expect getting in. But with Cripping the Arts, like we really wanted to make it integrated with the very program itself. So like I'll go to the table of contents, and it's just kind of a yellow screen with like a number of bullet points. But included in there is the introduction. What is a symposium? What is Cripping the Arts? What is a land acknowledgement? What does Harborfront Center look like? How will Cripping the Arts be accessible to me? How can I help make this place safer and more inclusive for others? And there's a number of content pieces, but what I wanted to highlight is actually the glossary that was created, wherever that is. Okay, here we go. So there's a glossary here which defines that. It says, what are some of the words that will be, what does that actually say? What that will be used? Yeah. And then it says, this glossary includes some words and ideas that may be used in conversations and performances at Cripping the Arts. And this was actually created because there was some critique from the first Cripping the Arts in 2016 from Soul Express, which is a group of artists labeled with intellectual disabilities who attended and said that a lot of the words used could be hard to understand at times. And so this glossary was created in an effort to kind of mitigate some of the academic ways that a symposium might be created. So I just thought this was really a wonderful way of understanding just like how critique and feedback is really important, and to listen to it. And in this case, you know, the access guide that was created, I think, was a really rich and powerful document. You know, there were graphics that went along with what was written. And it really was, I think, an attempt to try to make what is usually like a very heady event, a symposium, like what even is a symposium, and turn it into something that could be a space that imagines people who aren't just the folks who always go to symposiums. You know, I think I could spend an hour talking about this access guide, but I just wanted to note kind of the glossary that was created, just because I think it was helpful to kind of just recognize how feedback could be taken up, and you could do really generative things with it. And they worked with Soul Express when we were creating the guide itself. So thinking about how we could use plain language when we were creating the definitions, and really working with Soul Express to create this glossary was, I think, a really important part of how this feedback was taken up. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Yeah, that's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you for adding that. And I noticed you placed the link to it on the chat, and it's really a great idea to study the access guide. You know, one of the things about symposiums can be that the academic, the lingo, the acronyms, and immediately alienates and negates the quest for accessibility. So I have another question here about the reasons why art spaces remain inaccessible. Is it a lack of awareness, or is it a lack of resources, or is it a lack of willingness? Like what is the experience that you've had in maybe advocating for spaces to become more available? Sorry, more accessible.
This is Sean. I'm just gonna say it. I think it's capitalism.
Simple.
And to elaborate on that a bit, I guess, is like, I think a lot of spaces, you know, there's an openness to being accessible as a concept when it's first brought up, but it's hard to implement, and it takes commitment. It takes, you know, money, and a lot of times the structures that exist in place for, you know, smaller artist-run centers to try to implement that access when they're just trying to make things work on a shoestring budget is really difficult. And so there's a real, I think there's a real negotiation, but I do feel like in our kind of capitalist world, it's so much like we need to do all the programming. We need to like spread ourselves really thin. And I think instead we need to pause and, you know, think about how we can create better programs. And, you know, maybe we do less, but maybe we engage deeper, or we, you know, we begin to center access. Because I know so many organizations who try to do it perfectly that one time, right? Like they have the ASL interpreters and the captioning, and they have, you know, STEM toys and an access doula. But the thing is, if folks don't show up that first time because historically your programming hasn't been accessible, that's not being ungrateful. That's being realistic. You know, that's people not trusting the space immediately, which I think like needs to be the case. And so whenever I'm consulting with an organization, I always talk about transparency being the key, and really like building your access as an iterative and co-designed process, so that, you know, maybe you start with having straws at all your event. That's the easy, simple one to do, right? But like that's a part of being accessible. It's not really probably going to be on any AODA checklist, but it is a way of showing that you're thinking about others and imagining others in your space. And so I think that's kind of when I cheekily said capitalism, like, I think, you know, to resist capitalism is really hard because it's ingrained into how all of us have been raised and grow up, and like, at least here in Canada. So to resist it, I think, is difficult, and it takes a conscious effort. But yeah, that's my hot take, is capitalism.
Michelle?
I wanted to add elitism and privilege. This ableist, you know, and ableism, you know, really permeates the art space across the country. We all have seen it. Encountering it is very difficult. When I've applied for certain, you know, shows, there's layers of bureaucracy. There's layers of academic, you know, aesthetism, right? There's that is not readily accessible for, you know, most folks with different abilities and different communication abilities, and where arts organizations and, you know, granting bodies excel when they, you know, give options for, you know, communication and options for, you know, submission, and they are lax on you know, time frames, keeping in mind that other people are neurodivergent and have, you know, issues, you know, working on time frames, and, you know, being flexible, and at our core, we are flexible with each other because we understand. But these, you know, art spaces in our country can sometimes be, you know, gate kept by, you know, PhDs and, you know, master students in fine arts. And, you know, they are so layered by bureaucracy and process that there's no flexibility to become a very human, inclusive space. And Sean, you said it perfectly when they imagine, you know, their space being inclusive for all types of people who could possibly come into their space, and how can we facilitate that? You know, the concept of having, you know, theater spaces that have that relaxed performances. When I first heard of that term, it was remarkable. And it does not just for disabled people, it's for, you know, parents with small children. You know, there's having a relaxed performance, you know, it helps all of us, and not just the disabled community. So I just had to say that, you know, like what comes, our ideas that, you know, come out, I've been able to try to filter it out to like the mainstream, you know, report, whenever I get asked about, you know, from reporters, I've actually, you know, included that term, you know, relaxed performances, and they had never heard of it before. And I think I was like talking to the CBC. And so it's remarkable what's coming out of, you know, the disabled arts movement. We can then disseminate it to larger people, larger groups, right?
Definitely. I think you both just really said it really well. And the one thing that I wanted to add is, you know, because as you said, Sean, arts organizations are spread so thin, they make accommodations on an as needed basis. So as the disabled artist in my community, me and my peers who are also disabled, we have to be the trailblazers, and that we have to bring awareness and the training, and after a certain point, it becomes exhausting, and just, I don't know, just tiring, right? And so it's commendable that they, like, people want to make that effort, but it always has to happen in partnership with those who are in need. And so it would be nice to have some sort of, like, I don't know, maybe hire someone as a consultant, or like, you know, can I get an extra fee for teaching you where to buy a lever door handle and an adjustable workstation kind of thing, you know? So it's just, I mean, part of the package. But
I think Sean mentioned an access doula. Did you say that?
Interesting.
Yes, I did.
I've never heard that term before.
It's something that was introduced by Kevin Godkin, who's part of the Critical Design Lab. When they hold these remote access dance parties, which are like dance parties, accessible dance parties on Zoom, they have someone who, like, essentially it's about creating a sense of community, and they have folks there as essentially helping create access on the fly if things aren't accessible for you. I think disabled people have been doing it for time immemorial. It's just they attached a name to it because they source a lot of their access very kind of grassroots, and so folks sign up, to do the captioning, or folks will sign up to help be an access doula, or they might help to create the transcripts for the party. And so I think it was a term that really stuck with me. And yeah, I've been using it ever since.
I love it. I love it. And it could be another way, I think, that organizations could start embracing it. And like you said, really democratizing this process, and not just really falling on the one artist who has to be the trailblazer in order to get shown.
And I just wanted to add one thing on the idea of like hiring and paying consultants, for disabled folks who are interested, or for organizations that are interested. Creative Users created what they call a network connector. So folks can sign up to kind of, if they have experience as a consultant, or they want to share their experience, they can sign up to be like part of the network connector. So I always encourage folks to check out the network, and I think they're continuing to grow what it means to be part of that network connector. And I always encourage disability artists to sign up for it.
Excellent. Awesome. And I think I'm going to move into the last question I have here. So I don't know if everyone wants to take turns again answering it. And then if folks want to start typing some questions into the chat box or into the Facebook app, we're going to have about 5 to 10 minutes for question and answers. So please get those questions coming in. But our last question to the panel was, what practices can organizations adopt to make public art more inclusive? What are some of the steps that we're talking about and moving towards this horizon point?
I think, Sean, when you mentioned, just think about maybe just offering straws at your next opening, that is so bang on. Like, even just the tiniest little thing could make such a big difference. Never mind talking about, maybe actually have a line in your budget for access in your organization. Maybe actually invite disabled people to work for you, or to be on the board. Think about universal design when you're designing things, so that things are not afterthoughts. Just let people know what kind of access you do have and don't have, and just little things make such a big difference for someone. If I go to an opening and I don't have a straw, I might not have wine, and so that will like change my experience of going to the opening. If I can enjoy some wine with everyone else, I don't feel like I'm limiting myself. It's ridiculous not ridiculous, but it's a simple example, but I'm so happy that you brought up that straw issue. But yeah, so it could be like, there's just so many so many things. And I know Tangled, you did a sort of like a how-to manual too in a few years back, didn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did with Humber. I always say that that's really a 101 starting place, like just to, but I can also drop that in the chat actually. Thanks for bringing it up.
Excellent.
So I think signage, communication with your the people who are going to enter your space, is kind of key. I can cite too many examples where there wasn't enough signage or postage. I had a really bad chemical reaction to theatrical fog machines, Lemaitre. It's the worst for me. And it was used during a performance, and I was sitting in the front row, and I moved to the back because I saw this haze, this theatrical haze machine, permeate the audience, and eventually it reached the back of the theater, and I had to leave. I was sick for 3 days, and it became a point of discussion in the local newspaper. I was, interviewed by radio, and I was made to seem like a crank. And it was, embarrassing, but at the same time, I made them aware when I bought the tickets that I was on multiple chemical sensitive. And so they have since now put, fog machine warnings. So, sometimes it's a bad experience that, facilitates change. And it would be nice that that wasn't the case. But, so that's my experience in Thunder Bay. And so I try to educate as I go, right? It's just what we have to do.
Sorry you had that experience. And I think it brings up also the point of the, there's always this range or this sort of fluidity between what you do to mitigate and what makes things accessible for one person may make it inaccessible for other folks, right? So if you have straws for people to enjoy the wine, but you don't have any non-alcoholic beverages, are you accessible? Because what if someone who's sober wants to hang out and not feel ostracized? That's usually my go-to example, but there are others where disabilities are so wide-ranging, and there are competing needs, and how do we address the different expectations? And I'm waiting to see if there's any questions on the chat box. I invite people to type your questions in the chat. Or Janet, you'll be looking out in the Facebook page to see if there's any questions there. And I do also understand there's a little bit of a lag on Facebook, so the questions might be coming in a little bit. But we are about 5 minutes away from our ending time if folks have to move on. So what about any final thoughts from our three panelists on everything that we've talked about?
So I'm finding that things are changing, that, I'm getting asked for my opinion more and more often as, it becomes known that, I'm, discussing, disability and access. And it's wonderful to, be asked my opinion. It's not often that we get invited to, in the planning process, as, everyone has, mentioned that's probably a start. Like there's a queer, movement here in town. And I told them that they should have Indigenous, two-spirited, inclusion from the get-go. and then they ask me to speak. And so criticizing and holding people, questioning whether or not they are doing their utmost to be accountable can sometimes facilitate, inclusion. And so we have to be vigilant and try to say, hey, can you do this a little better? Or what do you think you could do to do this better? And then, sometimes we get invited in under the tent, so to speak.
And as you get invited in, you are pushing the door open, but you're holding it open for so many more behind you, right? I love that. All right, people are being shy today. I think we've had so many different topics, and I hope that people, if you haven't been able to click on the links, Janet said that she would be sending later on the files. So the chat file should have all the links appended. There are no questions so far, but Nicole wanted to say this has been great. Thank you to all the speakers. My phone is about to die, so I won't make it to the end, but learned a lot and see potential for advocacy as an artist at future OT. Thank you.
Yeah, I also just want to chime in. If anybody maybe is just digesting everything that's been covered today, but you still want to ask any of our panelists questions or steps or arts accessibility network questions directly, you can reach me by email. I've just put it in the chat, and I'll follow up with everybody who was attending today to share all of the links and all of that. So please feel free. And I guess we can sort of just wrap it up at this point. So before we all part ways, I just wanted to thank our wonderful guest panelists for being here and for sharing this thoughtful conversation around the idea of access in the arts and cultural sectors. And I wanted to express my gratitude to all of you for your openness while sharing your past experiences today. I would also like to thank our wonderful interpreters, Christina and Tessa, for joining us today. And STEPS would like to extend its thanks to the CreateSpace residency funders, of course, who made this event possible, Artworks TO, TD Bank Group through their Ready commitment, and MAWA. MAWA has been an amazing support throughout the CreateSpace residency program, both through the program's mentorship component and throughout the creation of the 10 temporary public artworks that are happening across Canada this year. And lastly, STEPS would also like to thank our wonderful partner for this event, Art Accessibility Network Manitoba, for coordinating and co-hosting this event. Janelle, you've been an amazing team member to work with, and I'm so grateful for your support on this. I'll pass it off to Janelle, if you'd like to say a few words before we part ways.
Great, thanks, Janet. Just basically want to thank everyone for tuning in, and especially for the panelists and the moderators. I really think that the true experts on disability and accommodation are not, the architects or the doctors. It's those with lived experiences. So sessions like this, where those with disabilities or the facilitators, the panelists, I think those are just so much more meaningful conversations that we can have around disability. So thank you to the four of you for, just sharing with us your experiences, because it just makes the whole talk on accessibility so much richer. Thank you again to STEPS and everyone, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Chi miigwech, salut.
Bye.